Gran Turismo 7, obviously Polyphony Digital have always pushed the limits of technology on PlayStation consoles, and it looks like they're doing it again. We've got an upgrade here to the base game. It's looking impressive. We're getting RT reflections on track, as they like to say. There's also there's also discussions of an 8K mode, which we discussed in the first direct. Kind of nuts, but I'm happy it exists. Now we've got better footage. And who wants to talk about that?
I kind of don't mind. I talked with John a lot about this because John is our GT expert here, and he downloaded the footage. And I wanted to say two things mainly. The first thing is John's initial impression was, this looks lower res. And I thought that was a very interesting John reaction to that. John knows this game obviously like the back of his hand. He literally spent so many hours in it due to that Forza Motorsport versus GT7
fair
video.
point.
Yeah, he spent like so much time in there. But he said it looked noticeably lower res to him. And I think there's two good reasons for that. The first is because it is lower res. So it's countable like a lot of PSSR games, but I was really interested on like the opaque edges that don't have ray traced reflections in them. To get clean edges for that, I waited for the camera cuts to occur in all the footage that we have that is of replays, right? I think there's replay footage here. And every camera cut there was around like 1188p, which is like 60% of axis resolution 4K, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe even a little bit higher or lower. But that is interesting because the base game without RT reflections on PlayStation 5, I think is a native 4K going up to 60. And that is a huge drop in resolution. Really huge, but they're using PSSR most likely to bring it up to a 4K looking presentation. But another aspect which makes this look lower res, and to John's eye just looked lower res to him, was the fact that the RT reflections appear to be quarter res of output. So it looked like they were 1080p internally, and any of the metallic edges especially will show the internal resolution of the ray tracing. And that is a thing that's common to a lot of upscaling techniques. You'll definitely see it in FSR. You can definitely see it quite often also in DLSS, less so on the edges, but more on the internal detail with DLSS. And that is an area where DLSS's ray reconstruction comes in. And now that is something that Sony has not talked about at all. They're currently using PSSR just to upscale the final color output of the game, most likely. And DLSS ray reconstruction takes the noisy input and then upscales that as well too with all the ray tracing. That is something that I would actually be curious to see if Sony invests in time, maybe for the next generation of PS6, but definitely. But I would be curious to see if we see evolutions of PSSR over time, because right now in this title, due to the lower resolution rendering of RT, it's much more easy to see that internal resolution. And I feel like that's like not so great looking, but the one thing that did look really great with the RT reflections was how it's nothing like Forza Motorsports. They are high quality. They seem to reflect a lot of the surroundings. A lot of the cars are in them with a good look to the car in the reflection. You can see like a lot of that in the footage here, as well as when they show the internal shots of the cars from those replay footage. You can see like rougher plastics and rubbers are also getting reflection, something that is not at all in Forza Motorsport. They just look good, bar the resolution thing I was talking about. Yeah. So I think this is interesting, is that it's showing us a game that is noticeably lower resolution in the PS5 Pro performance mode with RT.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say that GT7 was not actually the very cleanest game in the world, even though it was at 4K in its PlayStation 5 incarnation. And here I did notice that in areas of the image that were relatively stable between frames, it was being reconstructed to something that, to my eyes, compared to GT7, looked pretty similar. So it did give a pretty similar to 4K resolve. I don't know if they're going all the way to 4K here, but it looked quite similar. It could very well be the case that they are. With PSSR. I did notice some aliasing in the RT and some breakup in the RT, like when you're on that snowy track and you're right behind that pickup truck, when you're looking at the reflective detail on that, even though it's a very glossy surface and really should be giving you a clean and very sharp reflection, it's actually breaking up a little bit more than you'd usually think, and certainly more than you would have seen in the replay mode in GT7 on PlayStation 5. But like Alex mentioned, some of the rougher materials seem to be getting that RT reflections treatment, like in the center dash, in some of the replay footage. It appears to be reflecting the driver's red outfit there. And there is some breakup in that reflection in the replay dash that makes me think, yeah, for sure that's RT reflections, because that's super indicative of an RT reflections technique. But I think, like, ultimately there's no free lunch here. And the PS5 Pro is very powerful hardware. But it does seem like when you're adding RT, especially potentially to a game that's at 60 FPS where you're also trying to do PSSR, you might not get there without a big res cut, because PSSR can get you there in terms of clarity, but it is expensive. So here I think you are getting a definite big improvement over the existing PS5 code. I think you might be taking a slight compromise to image quality here, but I think that ultimately having those RT reflections in gameplay is such a big boost to the quality of the visuals. And like Alex said, it's something that we don't see in a certain other racing title that did make certain promises about RT reflections during gameplay. So here, I think it's a very interesting game. It's probably the most interesting upgrade of the titles that we've seen thus far on PlayStation 5 Pro. And it's an interesting upgrade, maybe a slightly controversial one for those reasons, but I think ultimately probably a fairly satisfactory one.
Well, what can I say? I just want to test that 8K mode just for my own perverse curiosity, to be honest. Simply because obviously it's not going to be happening natively. I think I mentioned this in the Direct we did the other day. It's going to be leaning heavily on PSSR, and basically, how does it hold up? I mean, you were talking about 32 million pixels upwards for a single frame there.
Wow.
What is the based internal resolution there? How well does PSSR cope with that level of upscaling factor? Used to be the case that, I mean, when we first saw this sort of 8K push, it was with the 3090 on NVIDIA. They tried to market 8K. Didn't work particularly well, but and the irony is that the 4090 is actually a lot better at it, and you could probably do a pretty good presentation with it. But hardware class, we're talking like a downclocked 4070 here, producing an 8K output. That's a big ask. I've got to check that out.
Yeah. Also, the cost of PSSR is going to skyrocket. That's something that happens with DLSS. So it's going to be taking like a huge chunk of the frame time away. So I'm curious to see like what's the balance there. Are they going to try like an ultra performance mode equivalent? You know what I mean? I don't know.
It's going to be like 1440p or below for sure, right? Doing it at 4K seems kind of crazy even.
Mm-hmm.
It does seem like a lot, actually, to ask.
So, assuming 1440p, that would be like a 3x3 upscale, which we have to wait and see.
At 8K, it could be pretty good, I think.
It could be all right.
It could be okay if you're far away.
If you're far away. How far away?
That was my review back then when I did the 8K video about the 3090. I said like, ultra performance mode is better than I thought it could be, but you have to be pretty far away.
The interesting thing with the 4090, of course, is that you can actually use 4K as the base resolution in a lot of titles.
Right.
And, a 2x2 upscale with a quality upscaler like DLSS actually looks really, really good. So maybe they were just a generation too early with the 8K marketing, but by the time the 4090 came out, nobody cares about 8K anymore. Even though there's actually pretty cost-effective screens out there now.